$340 million. That's how much money these scammers stole from Warren Buffett. Most people wouldn't even know what to do with that much cash. But for Warren Buffett, everyone's favorite billionaire investor, $340 million is just a drop in the bucket. The world-famous investment tycoon watched more than $250 million of his hard-earned dollars disappear from under his nose. Just how exactly did a savvy businessman like Buffett get scammed so badly? Buffett is the CEO and chairman of the hugely successful holding company known as Berkshire Hathaway. As all great investors do, Buffett has compiled a diverse portfolio of investments over the years in his efforts to maximize Berkshire Hathaway's prospective earning potential. Any investor will tell you that in the climb to the top of the stock market game, there will be plenty of victories as well as plenty of losses. This is the story of one of Berkshire Hathaway's ugliest failures, a strikeout so horrendous that they were forced to absorb hundreds of millions of dollars in losses when it was all said and done. The renewable energy ecosystem has rapidly evolved into one of the most popular and sought-after industries in the investment world. Brands and businesses of all shapes and sizes have continuously tossed their investing hats into the renewable energy ring since the mid-2000s. Why? The answer is twofold. Firstly, companies that work in the field of renewable energy sources like solar energy are generally viewed in a favorable light by the public due to their positive impact on the environment. As a result, businesses that choose to financially support the efforts of these renewable energy companies are able to soak up a lot of that goodwill in the court of public opinion. And while any press is good press is really good press. If good PR isn't enough of an incentive to invest in renewable energy, then perhaps some tax credits will do the trick. Renewable energy investors are awarded hefty federal tax credits, making it all the more enticing to pour lumps of cash into companies like DC Solar, a Bay Area solar energy corporation whose objective was to create thousands of mobile solar generators. These generators would be used to supply solar energy to outdoor venues in need of power, like concerts and sporting events. Even cell phone towers would make use of DC Solar's generators. The company was led by husband and wife duo Jeff and Paulette Karpoff. They began to make some noise in the renewable energy scene with their inventive mobile solar generator model. They promised to lead the way into a new era of adaptable and renewable energy, and they were seen as rising stars in the industry. Their work, along with the tax incentives they guaranteed to potential investors, generated the attention of big names looking to stake their claim in the renewable energy space. Warren Buffett was one of those names. His company, Berkshire Hathaway, dumped a whopping $340 million into DC Solar. In total, DC Solar was able to collect $2.5 billion from a dozen or so investors. From the outside looking in, the Karpoffs had made it. They were living the good life, riding high off the copious amounts of investment money they secured from companies like Berkshire Hathaway. While it might be a wise business practice to put all that money right back into the company to support their work, the Karpoffs had different plans. They used the outrageous sum of money to fund their lavish lifestyle, a lifestyle full of unnecessary luxuries and absurd personal expenses. But if you've got an endless stream of investment money in your back pocket, why not? The Karpoffs took the money that was invested into DC Solar and used it to purchase well over 100 collector cars, including a 1978 Pontiac Firebird that was previously owned by Burt Reynolds. Jeff's expansive garage was bursting at the seams with high-end vehicles, more than any one person should need, and the Karpoffs' ludicrous spending didn't stop at luxury cars. The couple also indulged in a ton of expensive real estate, opulent properties in California, Mexico, even the Caribbean. The Karpoffs used the financial means they had stumbled upon to even fund their very own professional baseball team in their hometown of Martinez, California. The team was called the Martinez Clippers, and while they weren't in the major leagues, having a baseball club to call their own was a dream come true for the owners of DC Solar. The Karpoffs parlayed their emerging public standing into a chance to get DC Solar's logo on the side of an official NASCAR driver's vehicle. That driver was Ross Chastain, a 26-year-old up-and-comer in the NASCAR world. Not only were they dealing with some of the greatest business minds in the world on a daily basis, they also got to parade their company's name around the NASCAR Speedway in front of millions of eyes. This was rock star living for a couple that had originated from very humble beginnings. They weren't born into a gigantic inheritance and didn't work their way up an already established company's hierarchy. They built DC Solar from from the ground up. Jeff had once made an honest living working on cars as a small-time mechanic, which might explain his love for exotic vehicles. After years of hard work and shady dealings, the Karpoffs headed a booming solar energy empire funded by the likes of Warren Buffett. For the Karpoffs, the American dream had come true. Their dream, however, was too good to be true. In December of 2018, it all came crashing down for the Karpoffs. As the new year came knocking, so did a squad of FBI agents. The feds entered the Karpoffs' residence and seized much of their belongings, including Jeff's exorbitant hoard of cars. Everything they had worked for, everything they had accomplished through DC Solar, disappeared in seconds. What exactly had been going on? As it turns out, the Karpoffs had been lying about the nature of their work at DC Solar. They exaggerated their efforts to produce solar energy generators to their investors and to the public, promising that they were working to deliver more than 12,000 units from the funding they'd received. However, that's not where the money was going. The couple had been laundering their investors' cash, using it to support their expensive hobbies and their costly way of living. They never used a dime for its intended purposes, the generators themselves. While the FBI did discover some mobile generators while raiding the DC Solar property, it was not the amount that the Karpoffs ensured were in operation, not even close. The deceitful owners of DC Solar went to extreme lengths to cover up their lies, setting up GPS devices in the locations of these fake mobile generators to make it seem like they were where they were supposed to be. In reality, most of the generators didn't actually exist. The Karpoffs didn't act alone. While they were certainly the masterminds behind this massive criminal conspiracy, additional employees at the company were also implicated. In the end, there were 5 other individuals prosecuted in relation to DC Solar's crimes. While the Karpoff scam took chunks out of billionaire investors, there were a handful of folks that suffered in the wake of their Ponzi scheme. The Martinez Clippers weren't just a fun investment for the Karpoffs, but a real chance for Martinez, California residents to get into professional baseball. Martinez, California had had a long history with professional baseball, as none other than Joe DiMaggio was born there in 1914. The field the Clippers played on was named Joe DiMaggio Field, and their team name was a nod to Joe as well. DiMaggio was nicknamed Yankee Clipper for his agility on the field. Martinez country was elated to have a professional baseball team to call their own, and they had the Karpoffs to thank for it. Little did they know the nature of the storm brewing overhead. The Clippers had a Hollywood-like story as their debut season got off to a rocky start. They only won 8 out of 40 games in the first half of the season. After a managerial change, the Clippers would go on to win 21 of their next 40 games. While the Clippers' on-field performance has nothing to do with the Karpoffs, it's the money the team was able to bring in and the entertainment they were able to provide to Martinez that brought the community together. Young athletes looking to make it in the world of professional baseball had an avenue to do so. Unfortunately, the Clippers were dissolved after the FBI raid on Karpoff's home. Unable to cover the cost of renting Joe DiMaggio Field, the fans, players, coaches, and staff never saw another game. It would seem like there are no plans to revive the Martinez Clippers, as their last Facebook post is dated November 23, 2018. It makes mention of looking forward to the 2019 season. The Karpoff home would be raided a few weeks later, and the Clippers would never see the field again. The Clippers weren't the only sports hopefuls to have their dreams crushed by Karpoffs. Remember Ross Chastain, the NASCAR driver once sponsored by DC Solar? His career was upended along with everybody involved, from pit crew to mechanic. The raid of the Karpoff home and revelations of their Ponzi scheme left Chastain without a sponsor for the number 42 Xfinity car. He hardly got to drive it as the Karpoff home was raided 2 months after the announcement was made. Thankfully, Chastain was able to bounce back driving for Nice Motorsports. As a result of all this madness, Jeff and Paulette Karpoff were in serious trouble. Their crackpot scheme to sucker investors out of millions upon millions of dollars was ultimately foiled by a former employee turned FBI informant. Jeff Karpoff pleaded guilty in January of 2020 to conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. His wife pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of conspiracy to commit an offense against the United States and money laundering. While they haven't been brought to trial yet after a series of COVID-19 related delays, they will eventually be prosecuted for their crimes. Jeff is looking at a maximum sentence of 30 years in federal prison, while Paulette faces up to 15 years. When it was all said and done, $500 million was returned to the United States Treasury following DC Solar's massive fraud, and the Karpoffs forfeited more than $120 million in assets. This included all of Jeff's collector vehicles, which were repossessed by the federal government and auctioned off to recoup the investors' losses. The U.S. Justice Department called it the biggest Ponzi scheme in the history of California's Eastern District. Where does this leave Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway? Well, the billionaire will surely survive this fiasco relatively unscathed, but his wallet is a few $1,000,000 lighter. The company was bamboozled out of $340 million by the fraudulent Karpoffs, an embarrassing blunder on the part of the well-respected Berkshire Hathaway. It was certainly a regrettable chapter in Buffett's illustrious business career that he'd like to forget. While Buffett himself may choose to forget his mistakes, this whole ordeal should serve as a cautionary tale to all prospective investors who fail to do their homework before unloading their cash into someone else's company. The investors who laid down their money for a piece of DC Solar thought they were doing the right thing. They had their eyes on the prize being the federal tax credits promised to them, and the seemingly endless potential of the emerging renewable energy industry. These shiny trophies blinded them to any warning signs regarding the Karpoffs' misdeeds, and it ultimately cost them a lot of money. Click to watch one of these next videos.